As an organization, the League neither supports nor opposes any candidate or political party. The League of Women Voters was founded in 1920 and has provided candidate forums for St. Mary's County since the late 1970s. Our mission is to fortify democracy through issue-based education. The League of Women Voters' mission is to enable democracy, in large part through education with forums like this one and others on issues such as community development, healthcare, and the environment. We also work with the Board of Elections by holding voter registration drives and as poll watchers. We meet with area government representatives. We host speakers on topics of interest to our members. We provide an annual scholarship for an area high school student. The NAACP was founded in 1909. The St. Mary's branch received its charter in 1949. And let's see, that makes it 72. The NAACP's mission is to ensure the political, educational, social, and economic equality of rights of all persons and to eliminate racial hatred and racial discrimination. In addition to the St. Mary's branch of the NAACP works with the Board of Elections in hosting voter registration trainings, hosting voter system demonstrations along with question and answer sessions, and holding voter registration drives. In fact, they're out there tonight. If you're not registered to vote, they can help you out. The St. Mary's branch of the NAACP also partners with local churches to provide souls to the polls, where they encourage the community to get registered, educated, and to vote during early voting. And they also help provide transportation and host a rally on the last Sunday of early voting. In addition, they host voter education forums, meet with and host roundtable discussions with elected officials, and provide 2 scholarships each year. If you are interested in joining either the League of Women Voters or the NAACP's, information will be available for you. Just come find one of us and we'll help you out. This is the, or you can join both, correct. This is the 37th year we've hosted the candidates forums. We're also proud of our vote411.org, which is the state league's or the National League's online voters guide. We hope you'll take advantage of the information that is available there. Our Vote 411 page for the Kamnitz's Urban ticket has been changed to Urban Johnson following Mr. Kamnitz's untimely passing and Ms. Urban's decision to take the top of the ticket. The most recent news from the State Board of Elections is that the ballots will not be reprinted to replace Mr. Kamnitz's name, as many absentee ballots had already been sent to voters, so reprinting at this time will present challenges. The Maryland League of Women Voters will monitor the Board of Elections website to see if further explanations are provided about this change in the gubernatorial contest. We would like to give a special thank you tonight to the Lexington Park Library for hosting this event and extending their hours so we can have the event in one night. Thank you also goes out to thebaynet.com for live streaming the event and St. Mary's County for recording the event for playback on the Government Information Channel. Not related to the election, but an important event occurring in our community, which I hope everyone will make an effort to attend, is When Dating Hurts, presented by Bill Mitchell and the Kristen Mitchell Foundation on June 6th at 6 o'clock in the auditorium of Leonardtown High School. Presentations will also be held on June 5th at Choctaw High School, June 6th at Leonardtown High School, and June 7th at Great Mills High School. And there are a limited number of flyers for the event available at our table by the door. Some important dates to remember.
Thank you.
June 5th is the deadline to register to vote, update an address, or request an alternate polling place for the election. June 14th through June 21st, from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. is early voting at the Hollywood Volunteer Fire Department. June 19th, all requests for an absentee ballot must be received by this date via mail or fax.
I'm sorry, sir.
June 22nd, all requests for an absentee ballot must be received by this date by the internet. June 26th, from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. is the primary election. And July 9th is when voter registration will reopen for the general election. Once we have all candidates in place for the general election, we'll go ahead and start working on getting that form scheduled, and probably have that over a couple of nights instead of just one night. With regard to the ground rules, if you wish to ask a question, raise your hand, and a runner will bring you an index card, and if you need one, a pencil. Write your question briefly and legibly, please legibly, because I have to read them, being certain that it's relevant to the candidate seeking the office that is at the table. At the top of the card, write the name of the individual you want to address, or if you wish to ask every candidate, write all, and follow-up questions must also be submitted on cards. When you finish writing your question, hold up your card and the runner will take it to the review panel over here. The review panel will examine each question to be certain it is legible, appropriate for the office the candidate is seeking, civil, and stated politely. Please hold your applause until after the candidates have answered all the questions asked of them and made their closing remarks. Candidate procedures. Tonight you will be addressing candidates for contested primary races. Clerk of the Circuit Court, Republican ballot, Debbie Mills Birch and Pete Cuccinata. State Senator District 29, Republican ballot, Jack Bailey and Steve Waugh. Sheriff, Republican ballot, Tim Cameron and Tom Phelan. County Commissioner, District 1, Republican ballot, and District 2, Democratic ballot, Eric Scott Colvin, Mike Darris, Anne Marie Abel, and Rose B. Frederick, I'm sorry. Each candidate will begin with a 3-minute opening statement before we begin questions from the audience. Candidates then have 1 minute to respond to each question asked. When the question period is over, each candidate may make a 2-minute closing statement. Our Trostback has a computer timer and will signal the speaker with a yellow card at the 30-second mark, a red stop card when time is up. The speaker may finish a sentence, but nothing more. Remember, this is a respectful occasion. Please compose your questions in a civil manner and do not express support or opposition for any of the candidates during the forum. Finally, please hold your applause until the end. And we ask that you turn off all cell phones or at least make them silent so there are no interruptions there. Okay, now it's time to start. So the candidates for the Clerk of the Circuit Court, Republican ballot, if you can come on up, Debbie Mills Birch and Pete Cuccinata. Each of you have a microphone. You just need to push on the bottom of it to turn it on, and then hold it steady, close to your mouth when speaking so everybody can hear you. And we're going to go ahead and start with the opening remarks. We'll start with Ms. Debbie Mills Birch. Push the button on the bottom, and that should turn it on.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Debbie Mills Birch, and I'm running for the Clerk of the Circuit Court here in St. Mary's County. I'd like to first thank the League of Women Voters as well as the NAACP for hosting this event, and all the candidates and all the visitors who have showed up to support the candidates. Okay, so I'm going to go over a little bit of background on myself. I've been a resident of I've been a resident of Southern Maryland for all my life. I grew up in Charles County. I moved to St. Mary's County approximately 20 years ago when I met my husband and got married. We have 3 children. We live in a little town called Helen. We have 1 grandchild as well. We enjoy camping and spending time with family members as well as traveling. And most of the time you can find us hanging out at Maryland International Raceway because that's what our family does. My husband and 2 sons, we drag race. So that's where you can normally find us. I come from a family that has a long history of public service, starting with my father, who was a Maryland State Trooper, federal law enforcement officer, as well as a bailiff in Charles County and St. Mary's County, as well as my mother, who was a deputy clerk for the Circuit Court in St. Mary's County as well. Coming up this July, I will celebrate my 29th anniversary of service to the state of Maryland. which began starting with the Maryland State Police as a police communications operator, which is also known as a dispatcher. I did a little bit of time with Department of Social Services in Charles County as an administrative assistant to the assistant directors as well as the administrator director there. And since 2004, I have been with Maryland Judiciary, starting in Charles County as a courtroom clerk. The clerk's office is responsible for maintaining, processing criminal, civil, juvenile files, as well as recording deeds, mortgages, issuing business licenses and marriage licenses, and we also perform the civil ceremonies. They also perform oaths to local elected officials, as well as everyone's favorite jury duty, which I'm responsible for as well. You might ask, what experience qualifies me for this position? For starters, it is simple. I have worked in all areas of the clerk's office, from a courtroom clerk to processing the files, to assisting with business licenses, daily mail, bank deposits, bond forfeitures, and even performing civil ceremonies. Much has changed in the court system in the last year when we went electronic, also known as MDEC, which is the Maryland Electronic Court System. That means attorneys and citizens can file their cases electronically. I have a very strong work ethic, job history, and dedication to my job.
Thank you. Mr. Cucinato. Push the bottom.
Good evening. I also would like to thank the League of Women Voters, the NAACP, and my family, and obviously my opponents here this evening. I am Pete Cucinato, candidate for Clerk of the Circuit Court. Let me begin by saying the Clerk of the Circuit Court, by the nature of the work of the office, is obligated to perform by Maryland law, statute, and rules. It's a very non-political elected office. The Clerk of the Court for fiscal year 19 will oversee a staff of 26 and a budget of $2.3 billion. In my opinion, and the opinion of those in and out of our legal community, the next Clerk of the Circuit Court should be someone with a strong background in administration, management, supervision, and along with a proven track record of managing large budgets. It stands to reason that if the Clerk of the Circuit Court is going to manage and supervise a staff that large and be responsible for a budget that large, they should have experience in doing both. I currently work in the Circuit Court. I'm the manager of the juvenile and adult drug courts, and I've been there 14.5 years. In this position, every performance evaluation I've received from the judges that I've worked for have been outstanding rating, and that's the highest rating you can get. Overall, I have 40+ years of professional experience as a supervisor, manager, and administrator. During the course of my career, I've completed many hours of formal training in supervision and management, and as I rose to higher level positions. I understand and have implemented management strategies which foster a work environment where staff are motivated to work towards common goals, not an environment where staff sense a lack of purpose, support, or any goals. Since I do not work in the clerk's office, do I know every aspect of the work they support? Certainly not. But working 40+ years around and with the clerk's office, I do know generally the work they process and are responsible for. But you know, there's no sitting elected clerk now. She retired a year ago, and guess what? The work's continue to get done. And that's going to happen regardless of who gets elected in this election. There's a seasoned staff there to help the transition of the new clerk coming on board. But let me tell you, when my wife and I had our first 2 children, I was working a full-time job, I was working a part-time job, I was completing undergraduate school and graduate school. And believe me, it won't take me long to be up to speed. I'm a quick learner and multitasker. If elected, I believe I will be the first clerk of the court to assume the office with this many years of relevant supervisory management and administration experience and budgetary experience. Couple that with a graduate degree. I believe and hope you will too, that I am the most qualified candidate to lead this office moving forward. Now is not the time to take a step back, but to look forward to the future. Thank you.
Our first question is addressed to Mr. Cucinato. What is the primary reference source for clerks when questions arise? Be specific.
members. We'll start. There we go. Okay. I'm glad that's the first question out of the box, because I expected there to be questions about specific duties that happen in the clerk's office. And since I don't work in there, almost impossible to know exactly the ins and outs. I tried to obtain that information because I wanted to be the best informed candidate when I ran in this election. But guess what? The clerk's office wouldn't give me the information. I contacted Annapolis to find out what I could about the ins and outs and how they did their business model. And guess what? They referred back to me to Maryland Rule 16905F, which says the clerk's office doesn't have to give out this information to anybody. So they wouldn't tell me. I tried to obtain the information. I was told by the source in Annapolis that this year at a judicial conference, the judges actually tried to get that rule loosened up so that, in their words, we would get more qualified candidates running for clerk of the office around the state. Guess who opposed that? The clerks of the courts around the state. They didn't want that loosened. So people like me that aren't in the office can't run a credible campaign and know everything that goes on in the office. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go with the next question for Ms. Mills-Birch. Tell the audience about your current prior supervisory experience and number of employees supervised.
I have previously, sorry, forgot to turn this on. I have previously supervised several staff at the Department of Social Services when I worked there. Currently, I have not, while I have been under the Maryland Judiciary. However, that does not mean that I can't supervise at the clerk's office at this time.
Would you like to answer that question as well?
I would, but I'm going to quit playing with this. I'll just talk loud enough. In my 40-plus years of experience, I went from a deputy sheriff into a correctional administrator and now with the drug court. I actually supervise a staff office as large as the clerk's office. I've been through so many levels of actual training on how to be a frontline supervisor, a second-line supervisor, and how to be an administrator. There's a lot of strategies you don't know unless you get trained for it and then you're put in that position. This is an office of 26 people. Is what's in the budget allocated for next year. And it's good to me to know somebody that knows strategies to deal with management. You just can't come in or jump up to a level you've never done the levels in between. It doesn't usually work out real well. I have that experience. I've been trained in that, and I have over 40 years behind me of proof of that. So that's about all I have to say on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mills-Birch, how would you deal with a pro se party appearing in the clerk's office? And for the audience, pro se means without an attorney or unrepresented.
In the clerk's office, we are not permitted to give pro se litigants any legal advice. We do have numerous free legal clinics that are offered on Wednesdays and Fridays at the courthouse. We provide them with the paperwork that is located as well in the courthouse. We provide them a packet of information that includes the dates, the times, phone numbers for pro se litigants that they may call and request and ask any information to a qualified attorney that is on the other end of the phone.
Mr. Cuccinaro?
Well, working at the courthouse, I've seen that in action, so I'll just concur with what Ms. Birch said.
Okay, Ms. Mills-Birch, describe one instance in which you faced an ethical dilemma and how you resolved it.
I was a courtroom clerk many years ago in Charles County, and I was sitting on a jury trial. I happened to accidentally send some evidence back to the jury that was not supposed to go back. The jury had come back with their verdict, and at which point I realized that I had sent back the incorrect information or evidence. I immediately contacted both the state's attorney, the defense, as well as the judge to explain to them what I had done to correct my error. The judge was very accepting to my dilemma and what I had done, and they corrected that issue, which benefited the defendant even after. It would have benefited him prior to as well as afterwards for the judge to correct his sentence.
Mr. Cuccinaro?
I'm going to take it in a little different direction, something that's not on my resume. I've been a state certified counselor in the state of Maryland for 26 years. So I'm going to take a look at ethically a different way. As a counselor, we're bound by confidentiality. There's certain information, for those of you in the helping fields understand, that you can't give out. But sometimes it's very difficult not to. If you have somebody in a lot of pain and suffering, not to give out information to somebody that may be able to help them. And I've come across that as a certified counselor in the state of Maryland for 26 years, where I've had clients that I thought maybe the family could help, but they refused to sign a release of confidentiality, so I couldn't talk to the family, even though the family might be calling into our treatment center to find out what they could do, what was going on. So ethically, you have to follow, in that case, you have to follow the rules and the law of federal law of confidentiality and not give up the information as much as you'd like to. Now, you work with the client to try to transition them to open up so they will allow you to do that, but that's another story. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Mills Birch, what is your feeling about releasing older property records to the Maryland State Archives?
Releasing the property records, they're supposed to go to the state archives. That is where everything is housed. Evidence, records, court paperwork, it's all supposed to go to the state archives to be handled until their time of retention and can be destroyed.
I don't know if I necessarily understand the question, but in all the years that I've had to deal with records when I was a correctional administrator as well as a counselor, there are certain periods you have to keep things on site. Now, going to MDEC and everything's electronically, obviously the space will be alleviated. I know in the courthouse for the judges I work for, we have boxes down hallways because we lack space, storage space to put them. So any files that can be sent and stored legally off-site, they should be done as quickly as you can get it out of there.
Ms. Mills Birch, what would you do with lapse of funds in the budget at the end of the fiscal year?
Just like anything else, if you had a lapse in your bank account, you would try to make sure that you corrected that with the next fiscal budget so that it did not occur the next year and that you did have a balance that was accommodating for the following year.
Okay, if I'm going to understand this question right, then I do budgets and been doing budgets. When you have a lapse in your budget, I mean there's money still left at the end of the year, and I think that's what the question might have been. What do you do with lapsed funds? And the answer is you shouldn't have lapsed funds. You have a set budget. And if you're on top of your budget, there shouldn't be anything left that the state keeps at the end of the year. Because you don't get it back, it doesn't roll over, it goes back to them. So they've designated the clerk's budget, the clerk's office budget, so you should spend those funds. Now, might things come up during the year that might cause funds not to be spent, like someone leaves a position and it takes you several months to fill it? Absolutely. But if you're on top of the budget, you're going to modify that budget and spend it for what's best for your office and your staff and the operations, so you don't end up on June 30th carrying over our lapsed funds that the state takes back.
Thank you. Ms. Mills Birch, what skills or qualities are the most important in a clerk of court?
Some of the skills and qualities that are most important to a clerk of court are customer service as well as remaining fair and impartial. A clerk must be self-motivating and have a strong work ethic. In order to be a competent clerk, you need to have personal experience in actually doing all the aspects and duties of the office, have a passion for the work, strong desire to learn more and further your knowledge each and every day. You need to have leadership skills and able to assist staff members in their own individual personal growth, as well as being able to assist and back up when and wherever is needed. The clerk needs to know and follow and respect state laws and statutes.
I will concur with everything she said. It all sounded great to me. But I will also add on there, as an administrator and manager, as a counselor, trained counselor, one of the biggest assets I have found is between my head, on the outside of my head, my 2 ears, is listening. So I found with staff, particularly staff, as I believe the question for the clerk of the court would be how I interact with my staff, with the supervisors and line staff within the clerk's office. And the biggest asset I have going is listening. In most cases, I know when I was young in my career, I wanted nothing more than somebody to listen to me. It felt like my input meant something. And I learned that well along the way. That brings a lot of goodwill back to you if you're willing to listen to your staff. And after you get something implemented, suggestions, that's great. But at least if you know you're being supported by the clerk, by your boss, that's a wonderful thing. And I think this listening skill, number one asset that I would bring to the position would help the staff. Thank you.
Ms. Mills-Birch, describe your firsthand experiences, if any, dealing with people who are different from you socially, economically, or politically.
I don't have any issue with dealing with them. I've married same-sex couples, several of them. I deal in and out of the courtroom and with the public. From my experience with the state police as being a police dispatcher, as well as Department of Social Services, assisting with clients who come in and out the door for services, as well as in the court service, dealing with them on a daily basis, assisting them whether it's on the phone or whether in person.
Describe your firsthand experiences, if any, dealing with people who are different from you socially, economically, or politically.
Okay, well, my parents were Democrats. I think I handled that okay. So now that's the political part. For the rest of it, you know, when you work as in law enforcement and in corrections, obviously you're going to have a diverse personality you're going to deal with. All ethnicities, race, religions, everything is going to be in there. So you either adapt or you're not going to last very long in that environment. As a counselor, the same thing. I can't control, nor what I want to control, who comes through my door and needs my services. If they're hurting, I'm there as a counselor. Color, religion, sex has nothing to do with it. So 40 plus years, I've dealt with the wide variety of anything you could probably imagine in those settings that I've been in.
I'm going to, okay, the next question would be for Ms. Mills-Birch. What distinguishes you from your primary opponent?
What distinguishes me? Well, first off, I am working currently in the clerk's office, and I have, like I said, since 2004. I have worked in, again, every aspect. I'm very familiar with how the clerk's office operates, its policies, its procedures, as well as the new electronic court system that has been installed, the MDEC system. I just like anybody else, we have our issues. We work to get that straight. I'm not below any mistakes. I say I learn something new every day, and I live by that.
Mr. Cucinato?
And some of you might wonder why I keep standing up. When I was a teenager, I was 5'9", and now I think I'm about 5'7", so I'm standing just so everybody can actually see me. Okay. I applaud Ms. Birch for her time that she's put in state service, because I've had over 40 years of government service. I know at times it can be not very rewarding. You don't always get raises when people in the private sector are getting increases. You're sometimes put upon by the bureaucracy. But the distinction between Ms. Birch and myself is I'm coming with a wealth of knowledge as an administrator. As a trained administrator, a trained supervisor and manager, as somebody who knows budgets backwards and forwards. I've been through federal, state, and local audits, come out unscathed. And that says a lot over the years. I've dealt with million-dollar budgets. If I add up all the budgets I've had since I've been here in St. Mary's County, come through them wonderfully.
We're going to mix it up a bit. We're going to start with Mr. Cucinato this time. What would be your approach to faculty who aren't performing their jobs at an acceptable level?
Okay, something I dealt with because I was responsible for hiring, terminating, and evaluating staff for many years. And I can tell you that when you have an underperforming someone on your staff, it is much less expensive, and I'm using that word loosely, to bring the level, that person's level to up to acceptable level. It's a lot less expensive to everybody to do it that way than to terminate the person and rehire somebody else. So what we did and what we learned there's different skills and techniques to identify what the issues are. If it was a staff person who had been going along doing well, and then all of a sudden their job production started to change, maybe there's something going along in their life personally that you need to look at. Otherwise, you retrain them, you bring their skills up, you might partner with somebody else and put them with the right supervisor in the right position to bring the skills level up before you take any other action.
Ms. Mills Birch?
Okay, I would contact the staff member, find out what's going on, and I would sit and try to work with them to try to find out what is causing their issue of not being up to par. It's finding out what has caused an issue, if there's something wrong, if they're not happy with their job, if they need a little morale boost, and be able to work with them and get them back to the level that they were at when they first started.
Okay. Ms. Mills Birch, what makes you qualified to handle such a large budget the clerk's office has?
When I was at the Department of Social Services, I assisted with their budgets. I might not know everything that there is to know about it, but I'm a quick learner. I retain a lot of information, and I enjoy working with numbers. So I would be more than happy to work with it, learn it, and take it as it comes.
I don't want to drag this on and repeat myself, but extensive knowledge of budgets, that's been one of my primary responsibilities as a court manager. I primarily have gone out and gotten several $1 million worth of grants brought in the county. I've been responsible to manage them. I've been responsible to take that money and go through the audit process on several different occasions. I'm quite familiar with budgets, and I have no issues with them, understand them, know how to expend the funds, know how to move the money around, or know how to find out what we can and cannot do appropriately and legally with all funds that are geared toward and appropriated to the clerk of the court's office.
Mr. Cucinato, would you favor the clerk of the court being a nonpartisan election similar to the Board of Education?
You know, absolutely. When I started doing this campaigning, and I was in my opening remarks saying how non-political the position was, and you'd be surprised how many people, or maybe you wouldn't be, how many people in St. Mary's County don't know there's a clerk or there's an elected clerk of the court. And when we get to talking to them, just about everybody agreed. Why is it a partisan position? You're not dealing with politics in the normal realm. I wholeheartedly agree it should be a non-partisan position. I'll take it a step further. I think the position shouldn't even be elected. I think the position should be hired so that, whether it's the judiciary or whoever, would be the process to go through to be hired for the position, and not necessarily being elected, because it's an administrative position. And I think it's best served by the circuit courts in each county to know what they need in their clerk of the courts. Now, the law's been around for a long time. It got into Maryland Annotated Code, I think, in 1857, officially. But I don't know how we would change it, but I would take that even further step.
Ms. Mills Birch?
I do agree that it should be a bipartisan position. However, we are in an elected position, and the clerk of the court, granted, does quite a few things that are behind the curtain, so to speak, as far as not a lot of people know what we do as a clerk of the court. And I think by continuing it as an elected official, elected position, would be perfect, because that way you get the people in there that feel that they can do the job and are qualified to do the job.
Ms. Mills Birch, how long have you lived and worked in St. Mary's County?
I have lived in St. Mary's for 20 years. Well, actually, yes, 20 years I have actually lived in St. Mary's. I have worked in St. Mary's County on and off since 1989, my start of my career with the Maryland State Police, as working in Leonardtown, as well as the Southern Maryland region, as well as Prince George's County. Even when I was on vacation, I did off-duty, I did overtime on the Eastern Shore. So that just shows a little bit of dedication to my work ethic and history. But as far as being a St. Mary's County resident, it's been 20 years.
Mr. Cucinato?
I usually have to use my 4 sons and count backwards on their ages to figure out when my wife and I located in St. Mary's. I believe it's 18 years or 18 and a half years when we moved here. I actually located here in St. Mary's County prior to being employed here. We came over, saw the county, we were living in Calvert, we fell in love with what we saw, and we moved. And I still had to drive up to Upper Marlboro for another 3 years before I retired. That's how much we wanted to be over here. So I actually, 18 years living here, 14 and a half with the circuit court here.
Mr. Cucinato, how many offices within the clerk's office have you worked?
I think I already answered that. I've walked through a lot of their offices. I've never worked in any of their offices, so I said that in my opening remarks. I don't know if I have to go any further than that. I guess that answers it.
Okay, Ms. Mills-Burt?
I've worked in every office, every aspect of the clerk's office since 2004, starting in Charles County as well as in St. Mary's County.
Okay. Now we're going to go ahead and do the closing remarks. Ms. Mills-Burt, will you go first?
Sorry I didn't stand during the rest of it. I apologize. But again, I want to reiterate and thank the League of Women Voters as well as the NAACP for sponsoring this event this evening. In closing, I'd like to thank you for your time, your patience, cooperation, and understanding and listening to what the clerk's office does. You need someone who knows the office, policies, and procedures. And I am that person. Just because you have an administrative background and a college education does not mean that you can run or you are the best qualified for this office. I feel as though my work ethic, my history, as well as my dedication to each and every job I've had in my experience qualifies me for this position. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cucinato?
Look, it takes a lot getting up here. You know, people have never done it, so yes, you deserve a round for anybody that gets up here. I would like to thank again the League of Women Voters and AACP and my family and Ms. Birch again for this evening. In this primary election, the Republican voters of St. Mary's County will be choosing their candidate to face off against the Democrat who's here this evening in the general election in November. I feel strongly, and I hope that you do too, that we put the strongest candidate forward. I believe I am that candidate. This will not only help assure a win in November, it will provide the staff of the clerk's office with a fresh set of eyes, a professional administrator who understands the complexity of effective management and supervision. The circuit court, the legal community will have a clerk they have worked closely with for many years. I once took a training entitled Customer Service for Government Employees. I will bring that knowledge and it will be incorporated into the work environment of the office of the clerk for the benefit of all its customers, including the circuit court, our legal partners, and every citizen who enters our office in need of assistance. I'm going to thank everybody, but I just want you to remember what I talked about at the beginning and why there is a specific rule that disallows us, the citizens, to know the business model and what goes on in the clerk's office. The example I gave when I asked was, I come in and apply for a marriage license as a consumer. I would just like to know what steps that the clerk's office actually does to process that so I could walk out with a valid legal document to get married. And they said, no, we're not going to tell you that. Something doesn't seem right in that lack of transparency. And I think the judges had it correct when they wanted to loosen that up so they would get better candidates to run. It's a little, yeah, it's a little harder to run from the outside, absolutely. But I think the clerks like it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to take a short break.
I'd like to thank the League of Women Voters and the NAACP for giving me this opportunity. And thanks for everybody in the audience who came out here tonight to learn more about each one of us. Thank you, Steve, for your public service and your military service. I'm Jack Bailey. I'm a retired natural resource police officer. I retired after 30 years. My family, many of you are familiar with, has been here for several generations. I come from a long line of public servants. My father, he was a state's attorney, public defender, just a county attorney in Leonardtown. My mom, she was a school teacher. My great uncle, Senator Paul Bailey, he was a Republican senator for 16 years when being a Republican in St. Mary's County wasn't a very popular thing. I've continued this tradition of living in St. Mary's County. I live with my wife Karen and our two children, Helen and Taya. We're actively involved in this community, in the schools, church, Little League, travel ball, and various other community volunteer organizations. When I started my career, I was a game warden in both St. Mary's and Calvert counties. Then I started to work statewide. I started working with the U.S. Department of Justice and the Fish and Wildlife Service. I'm now a nationally recognized expert. I completed both my undergraduate and graduate work at Johns Hopkins. Got my master's in management. As far as legislative experience, during the Ehrlich administration, I was legislative liaison for the Natural Resource Police. During this time, I drafted bills, completed bill reports, worked with Department of Legislative Service personnel, lobbied members of the General Assembly, and testified on behalf of the administration. I also testified as the FOP president. Was the FOP president for 4 years. We did a lot of work in the legislature. These experiences will help me serve and do well as your next state senator. In addition to our Change Maryland agenda of lowering taxes and creating more opportunities for our small businesses, my agenda and my platform is education, public safety, school safety, the environment, and healthcare. I want to be available, approachable, and committed to each one of you. I want an office and be your full-time senator. I'm not going to have another job. I'm retired. This is my job, representing each and every one of you full-time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wall.
Good evening. Does this one work? Yep. Good evening. This one works, right?
Press the bottom. Press the bottom. Look for the green light.
There we go.
Better. All right. Hey. All right. Good evening, everyone. This is a packed room. This is the most people I've ever seen out here for one of these things. And thanks to League of Women Voters and NAACP for sponsoring us here tonight. And I want everyone to know the first thing I told Jack is don't worry, you won't die. These things are fun and fast and furious, but it'll be a great experience. So it's been my great honor and privilege to serve as your state senator for the last 4 years. And I've tried to focus on the things that you find most important and that you're most worried about in your daily life. And years ago, I ran on saying, hey, jobs are the issue, taxes are the problem, spending is the cause. And then the top priorities of the government need to be public safety, transportation, and education. And I think I've stuck to that. In fact, first day in office, I walked in, I laid down a strategy with the staff, and I said, this is what we're doing. If we're doing something not on that list, stop doing it. If it needs to be on the list, let's talk about it. But I think we've kept a laser focus on your priorities, and I believe that we've worked very hard to do that. And this last year, I've been very privileged to be in a position to make a real serious difference on a couple of different issues. And specifically on veterans, did an enormous amount of work on that. I'm very, very proud of, and kind of turned into the Tom Sawyer of senators. I got everybody else in the legislature doing the work for me now, which is great. And then on school safety. When things happened in Parkland and when things really, really got important, we stepped out and we did something. And I will tell you, that was the most proud moment of my term in the last 4 years, was making that happen for you guys. Now, I think most folks know that I'm a Marine. It means that I'm a little bit different. I have some rough edges. I'm sorry, that's just who I am. I try really hard. And I got to tell you, it's been a real personal journey for me to bite my tongue and wait and count a few seconds. And Matt and Deb and Jerry in the back have been the best delegates to work with, and they all know what a job it is for me to hold it all in and keep it going. But I've tried very hard, and the simple fact is that I'm one of those guys that just have a low tolerance for BS. I'm going to think for myself, and I'm going to speak my mind. and it's because I believe that I work for you. I don't work for anybody else. And I got elected to this office, I asked for this job so that I could work for you guys. So I believe that I have been that bulldog, and I'm hoping to be that bulldog again for you for the next 4 years. Thanks very much.
Senator Wall, the first question will be for you. Why don't you have an office in Calvert or St. Mary's County? What can you promise you will do to keep in better touch with the public?
Okay, when we first got elected, in fact, Matt and Deb and Tony and I all sat down and we looked at going to get a brick and mortar office. And what we figured out really rapidly is that it was a giant waste of taxpayer funding to just hang a shingle. Because the truth of the matter is that today's 21st century, and I just gave my cell phone to my wife Myra to hold, is that those cell phones that we have now, and the one that's being used to live stream this thing, are in fact a mobile office. This is what allows everyone in the 21st century to get out and about. And in fact, I have 6 different email accounts that go to that thing, including Facebook Messenger. So there's about a dozen different ways to get in contact with me really rapidly. And I think almost everybody in the county has got my email now. So I'm trying to be the most accessible guy that can be had. We do a really good job, I think, of rapping back to people as soon as we get a call. Then we scramble our district secretary out to talk to folks in person, collect some information, and then start acting on constituent issues. So I don't believe that wasting the taxpayer dollar on a brick and mortar office to make somebody feel good to have a shingle is worth it. I would rather hire people to get things done for you.
Mr. Bailey, how experienced are you in the operations of the Maryland General Assembly? Can we count on you to hit the ground running?
I just gave in my opening the fact that I worked there as the legislative liaison. I also worked there as the FOP representative. So I feel very experienced. Obviously, I don't have the 4 years that my opponent has for being there, but 4 years ago, he didn't have it either. And I don't know that he had what I had at that point. I'd like to correct the record just for a minute about this office in this 21st century. That's not exactly true, what was just said. Fact is, that money comes from the Senate to each senator. That money is then returned. In his case, it's returned to Mike Miller. The money doesn't come back to any of us. It's used in other areas around the state, in other districts, to support people that aren't managing their own budget. Not having a brick and mortar office doesn't do anything but take away from us and our constituents.
The next question will be for both candidates, and we'll start with Mr. Bailey. If I have solutions to better protect children from school shootings, how will you use the information I can provide to you when you are a state senator?
School shootings and school safety are our #1 priority, and we need to absolutely look at that. I just finished my master's at Johns Hopkins. #1 forum they're running there, how to protect school safety. And they're doing it, they're looking at all different types of people as the experts. They're looking at the local school level, they're looking from children all the way to the administrators, to the teachers, to the experts. Every single person involved in the process. And that's the way I think that we move forward. We move forward as a community, together. Our community leaders are elected and they're established. When it comes to school safety, we should be working with them. We should be working with our sheriff's department, our police, the people who are recognized as the experts. And as we work as a community, we will be able to solve these problems together. Not somebody that knows all the answers and says, this is how you're going to do it. We should do it together.
Senator Wall?
Okay, actually I got to go back and correct something that Jack just said. The way the budget, just to clarify this thing, the way the budget works, and by the way, I'm very flattered to have Chris Shank down from the governor's office here to conduct the coordinated attack. The way the Senate budget works is that, and it's a little bit different from the delegates, is that we're given a budget of about $40,000, and that's to be used for salary for personnel in your office and some other sundry things, and including an office. So if a senator pays for a brick and mortar office, which might cost you $12,000 a year or more, then that's going to come out of your office. We wouldn't have the money to pay for staff to come and help you with things. So then back onto the question of school safety. You know, we got a lot done this year. That was a really big issue. It was a really big job, and I'm sorry I don't have more time to talk about that.
Senator Wah, 2 years ago you required St. Mary's County Commissioners to cut taxes to gain borrowing authority to build Leonardtown Library and Senior Center. This year, Calvert County gained your support for a $41 million borrowing authority for new governmental center without a tax cut. Why are St. Mary's citizens held to a different standard than Calvert County citizens?
So the delegations are different. And in fact, when we were doing the St. Mary's County delegation bills 2 years ago, we'd gone through the Code Home thing, and there was a big question about how much debt was the appropriate debt level for the county. So part of the debt package that we ended up putting together and we agreed on as a team was, this thing just keeps coming in and out. Part of that was we wanted to get a property tax cut for the citizens of St. Mary's County in order to enable the $26 million that the commissioners had arrived at. In the end, and I'm sorry that Commissioner Randy Guy isn't here with us tonight, in the end I ended up negotiating with Commissioner Guy to get rid of that particular section of the bill in exchange for an offer from him that they would pick a tax and reduce it. So in fact, in that case, Commissioner Guy is the one who personally agreed to the constant yield in order to get the bond authority for St. Mary's County.
Mr. Bailey, there's been a lot of discussion on you following Governor Hogan's agenda. Where do you disagree with him?
That's a great question. The issue is the governor has a completely different constituent base than what we have here in St. Mary's County and Calvert. St. Mary's and Calvert County, we're conservative Republicans. The governor does not have that across the state. It's different for him. So when we look at things, and I've actually had this exact discussion with him sitting in his office. The fact is, I'm going to vote for you, for our citizens. I'm going to go along with you and your vote. I'm not going to vote to make our schools, our colleges less safe like my opponent did after he told the governor how he was going to vote.
I'd like to respond to that if I can. So, I'm not sure what Jack's answer was there. I'm not sure if he's saying that he will oppose the governor or if he's going to fully support the governor. So you might want to squeeze that out of him a little bit later. So the question was SB 543, and the entire piece of legislation was about moving the question of criminal background on a student application later in the application, away from the initial application into later in the process. So initially, basically everybody was opposed to it. Then the colleges and the universities came to us and they asked for an amendment to the bill, which we gave them. And when we gave that to them, they removed all of their opposition. In fact, privately they told us that they liked it because what it was going to allow them to do is look at criminal background only of 1,000 kids instead of 10,000 kids. It was going to make their life easier and actually allow them to make the campus more safe. And very explicitly in the bill, it says, institutes of higher education may inquire into a student's criminal background for purposes of admission and campus residency.
Mr. Bailey, how would you have voted on the free community college bill that Governor Hogan signed?
As being a new senator, I agree with the fact that with the community colleges that we have different bases where there's, when you only make a certain amount of money and you have a basis that is under the threshold, we should all have a good education and you get to go there. I disagree with the fact that there should be, that it should be open to people that are not U.S. citizens.
Senator Wah, why did you vote against the bill?
So I voted against the bill explicitly because it was specifically, and I mean very specifically targeted, to provide a free college education to illegal immigrants. Now the bill as it was constructed basically says, hey, we're going to create a fund, we're going to put $10 million out there, we're going to give it away in grants, and we're going to set it up so that it goes to kids from families of certain incomes down below a particular level. So not so bad yet. But then it also says that in order to apply for the grant, and it's a first come, first served thing, in order to apply for the grant, you have to have graduated from a Maryland high school. So that's 1 day. In previous bills, several years ago, when they were doing in-state tuition for illegal immigrants, they said you got to be here 3 years, you have to pay taxes, rah, rah, rah. Well, this time they said, no, you just have to have graduated from high school, so for 1 day. We tried to amend that out in committee, because the bill came through my committee. We tried to get rid of it in committee and fix it, they refused. That's when we knew it was very explicitly for the singular purpose of free education for illegals. We tried to amend it again on the floor, and they would not.
Senator Wah, what were your major legislative accomplishments over your 4-year term? Please be specific.
Well, the easiest one is the school safety bill. I got to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that was one that I was so just. In fact, I said earlier today, I got so excited when it passed, I actually forgot to vote. That, I think, is probably the most substantial thing that we have been able to get done in the last 4 years. It will make a serious difference in the lives of every student and every parent in this state, because we are working to make your schools more secure. It's not enough, it's not fast enough, but it was a huge step in the right direction. And that started on my desk. And that started, one day when I finally said, hey, if not me, who? And if not now, when? So I called up my good friend John Astell, and I said, hey John, I want to take a shot at this, are you with me? John's another Marine, he said, yes, I'm in. We built a bipartisan coalition, and in 5 days, I had the minority leader, the majority leader, and the Senate president all on board with a package of bills with about 12 or 15 different components of things that we were going to attack it. And getting that done, that was a massive accomplishment.
Mr. Bailey?
Can I respond to that?
Okay.
So here's what I would say. That was a step in the right direction, but that was a small step. It created, first off, as those of you that are familiar with our Sheriff's Department and our Board of County Commissioners and our Board of Education, we do 75% of what that bill says already, right? We already do it. And the part that was funded, it's an unfunded mandate that will cause financial problems for us, right? If you're going to legislate something, you need to put the money there for it. The governor had the same initiative, and the money was there for it. But it would have been much better served to have put the money and supported the governor's bill.
Mr. Bailey, Governor Larry Hogan has been outspoken in his opposition to President Trump, from announcing that he did not vote for Trump in 2016 to offering support to Maryland's Attorney General and suing the Trump administration for its travel ban policy. What is your opinion of President Trump? Do you share Hogan's opinion of him, and do you share his opposition to the travel ban?
Remember what I said about being able to vote and represent your constituents? From the first meeting that I've had with people, I understand conservative Republicans, and in St. Mary's County, we like Donald Trump. I support him, and I do like Donald Trump.
This is for both candidates, and we'll start with Senator Wah. What is your belief about the enactment of safe, sane, and sensible laws to curb gun violence?
So here's the real challenge, and this actually came up during the whole school safety debate, is that we looked at things from the perspective of, there's a magic moment when a gun arrives in a parking lot, but prior to that, there's a magic moment before a gun gets purchased. And so you can do things to control all the legal and registered weapons to the left side of that point, but it'll do nothing to affect all of the illegal and unregistered weapons. And in fact, this has always been a big question about how often are illegal weapons used in crime, and I had a bill put in to try to figure that out. But I withdrew it because about an hour before I showed up, we had the police commissioner from Baltimore, before he was indicted. We had the police commissioner from Baltimore come in, and he was asked point blank about the 343 murders in Baltimore. How many of those were done with a legal and registered weapon? His answer was none. Not a single one. So we can pile on all the gun control we want, things like a bump stock ban and this red flag bill, and it will not affect all of the gun violence in the state.
Mr. Bailey?
The fact of the matter is, Senate Bill 907 was sponsored only by my opponent. And that bill would have taken away, it would have created a public database that any person that used a firearm in self-defense would have been listed. And by the way, in St. Mary's County, any of you that are familiar, if you ever target practiced or discharged a firearm on any person's property other than your own, and you didn't have written permission, you'd be a misdemeanor. You'd committed a misdemeanor, and it's a $1,000 fine. That is the criminal law. So the fact is, anybody that ever did that would be a criminal and be in that database. And there's only one person in the whole legislature that put that in. That was my opponent.
Okay, I need a response. You can tell he spent a lot of time pointing at me. So, what I was trying to do, like I said, with SB 907 is the question of how much gun violence, and this is the thing, how many people in here are gun owners? You know, a lot. Okay. And as Sheriff Cameron was once asked, do you own a gun? He was like, no. I mean, I own a bunch of them. Why would you only own one? So, with 907, what we were trying to get at is the question of how much gun violence is actually committed with legal and registered weapons. And I knew what the answer was, but weirdly, and this is the thing that I know everyone here is going to have a hard time believing, is that that information is not tracked. It's not tracked by the FBI, it's not tracked by the ATF, it's not tracked by the state police, it's not tracked by anybody. So what we were trying to get to is the question of how much of this violence is actually being committed by legal registered weapons, so that I could make the case compellingly, which I did, that hey, gun control is not going to solve the problems of Baltimore.
Mr. Bailey, what will you be doing to continue Maryland Veterans Agenda for our military retirees and veterans?
Thank you. Great question. And shortly after becoming a candidate, I was approached by several veterans that had not had their cases heard, so by the local constituents. So I went directly to Annapolis. I met with the Secretary of Veterans Affairs, George Owens. I have 2 events planned with him in the next week because I feel veterans, as I thank my opponent for being a veteran, veterans are how we live here today, and we need to represent them. We go up and walk on the trail and visit with the veterans right across from my house. I want to work for them and with them. Thank you.
Senator Wong, earlier this year we lost funding for the 3rd wing of the Higher Ed Center. What is the plan to recover that funding?
Yeah, so that was a difficult moment. So what happened was a DLS analyst put in some information into the budget that was incorrect, and it was about the sizing of the facility and the enrollment. And it was all focused on declining enrollment. Well, if declining enrollment was a problem, we wouldn't put up a building in any college in the state. All of our physical universities are having a hard time. Anyway, Mike Miller ended up killing the money and stopped the merger. So we launched into a campaign with the delegates and I, along with the Board of Governors, and we got email going, we got phone calls going. In fact, so much so that the Speaker's office actually came to me and said, stop it, we get it. And it got put back inside of the House. So we got that part of it done. Then when we came back into the Senate, Miller killed it again. So I ended up spending the last 2 weeks negotiating a deal that revived the merger, put College Park in charge, and, oh, by the way, we'll get it reinserted into the budget after it's being appropriately sized and studied for enrollment, and then Governor Hogan has promised to fund it.
There's actually 2 options, two things with these bills. The first one was the merger. Merger bill should have been done prior to this year, right? It should have been done before, just like the appointment to the Board of Governors. It shouldn't have waited, right? The fact is, when it came up this year, Senator, I have your emails here, where you simply ignored Joe Anderson, and you ignored the county commissioners, and you just let it go. Joe, you sent an email around saying that this is a priority, don't worry about it. The analyst is not the decision maker. DLS makes all sort of recommendations, we just ignore them. Joe Anderson, he says, I beg to differ with Senator Wall, pleading with you to get involved. 2 days later, got killed. 2 days after that, you respond. Joe, you were obviously right to be concerned when you were. Fact of the matter is, this needed to be a higher priority for us, for our constituents.
Okay, I'd like to respond. So, again, nothing, never let the truth stand in the way of a good story, right? So the fact is that as soon as the funding was removed from the Capitol, or actually as soon as the DLS analyst put out his information, I immediately had a meeting with the Vice Chancellor of the University System of Maryland. He and I personally conferred, and we figured out exactly what the strategy was, and we started executing it immediately. Now, the unfortunate thing is that it didn't work. So that happens. And sometimes budget line items get killed. And in fact, I personally was engaging with the chairman of the Capital Subcommittee, chairman of the Budget Committee, and the chairman of the committee over in the House. Now, I was doing it constantly. It got to be a little bit of a joke between Senator DeGrange and I. I kept threatening to cut his brakes. So there was daily engagement on this. We were constantly working it. It never lacked for attention. And in fact, I think the delegates would agree we're on top of this from day one.
Okay, we're going to go on to the next question. Yeah, we're going to go on to the next question. Mr. Bailey, what is your position on aquaculture and its effect on property owners' riparian rights?
Thank you. Great question. I'm sure we're talking about the column oysters that are showing up in front of people's houses out in the river, and it's causing a great bit of controversy. Used to be, property owner controlled the riparian rights in front of their property as far as what could be out there. And used to be able to lease, the property owners leased all the oyster bottom out in front of their houses, and they controlled it. State came in a couple years ago and said, wait a minute, we're going to take away your riparian rights. So now these oyster farms are coming right in front of people's houses, right? But they're still paying high property tax for the smell and the vision that is obstructed in their ability to get to deep water. The state is acting like a bully on this one, and as far as our county and our constituents are concerned, we're going to have to address it.
Senator Wall.
All right, so if we want to clean up the bay, there's basically two things that we need to do. So first and foremost is that we got to fix the Conowingo Dam, because 80% of all the pollutants and all of the sediment that's in the bay comes over that dam. And actually, Governor Hogan's office has really led the way on this thing, and I believe we have a test dredge going now. We're going to figure out, or have a pretty good idea of what it's going to take to fix that. The second thing we got to do is that we have got to unleash aquaculture. Virginia has done this. They have oysters growing like you read about, and it is clearing up the bay, and it is clearing up their tributaries, and Maryland needs to get on board this and to make this happen. But at the same time that we do that, we have to protect everyone's individual land rights. Now, everyone knows that, hey, wherever my property is, I got land rights there. But your land rights don't really extend beyond your boundaries. Now, there's some zoning considerations, right? You don't want someone building the Empire State Building next to your house. So there are some limitations to it. And then as we look out into the water, you have some rights that extend a little bit, but not very far.
Next question, Senator Wall. Many employers in St. Mary's County have significant challenges in hiring a younger, skilled workforce. What will you do, or do you think should be done, to support these employers?
My son Philip is looking for a job right now. So we added to the workforce. So here's the thing. Jobs are the most critical thing, the most critical issue and metric that we've got out there. We've grown 100,000 jobs over the course of the last few years, but we need to do more. So what I want to do is I want to pull together essentially a strategy for both at the local level and at the state level that's going to address job growth specifically for startups, micros, and small businesses, so that we can help them with the three major challenges of access to capital, access to markets, and then regulatory relief. We've done some of this already. We did it with Guinness. We had to make a big change to the alcohol laws so that Guinness can build a big brewery up around Baltimore. And we're going to become a hub of the brewing industry. What we're working on now, I'm real excited about this one, is a Maryland malting facility. So,
Mr. Bailey?
There's some things here in St. Mary's County that we need to really concentrate on when it comes to job growth. One is tech jobs, vocational jobs, and the that third higher building. They all three would help in our economic status and our young people, right? Our vocational jobs, we are leaving out, and they would be a great thing for us to spend more time and more emphasis on. When it comes to the third building, right? That's an opportunity lost. And with the merger, when it came back in, by the way, it was slated to go in effect this July. Now, even though it's back in, it came back in for next March of 2019. So it's 9 months delayed. And there's no guarantee that the governor will have the money to fund the budget for the third building next year. He wants to, but there's no guarantee.
Actually, I'd like to respond to that just briefly.
We're going to go to
No, all right.
Okay.
Senator, sit down.
Mr. Bailey, would you support metal detectors in schools?
The whole issue of school safety and metal detectors is pretty easy. It's between the Sheriff's Department, the Board of Ed, and the Superintendent's Office, and the County Commissioners, because that is who controls the budget. They also control the safety of our schools, right? It would be great to say, hey, we want a metal detector at every school. And obviously, as a parent, I would love to have it. That's not reality because we don't have that money. There is not a money tree or a fairy duster that can just give us that money, right? That's why we work locally. That's why our Sheriff's Department is so far advanced over many of the other areas of the state, right? It's because we've got a good sheriff and they work together. And that's what we need to do, is utilize them in making these decisions.
You want me to answer that one?
No, I have a different question for you. Our current leaders must show that they are current on local needs and concerns. I'm interested to understand your outreach and meetings with our local leaders. This can only assist you in drafting or fighting for legislation in our area. How many times have you personally, not through your staff, met with our county commissioners, sheriff, superintendent, or other local leaders?
So, I don't know, a lot. I'd have to go back through my calendar and try to figure that out. I see them around in a million different places and a million different events, like there's a few of them here tonight. And we talk pretty much every time that we see each other. So, I don't know. I know we have a number of interactions, and we try to work with them as best we can. But you know, some of those, and it's certainly on every one of the local bills. And we had the annual meeting with all the commissioners, and we go through them. Like last year, they presented, I forget exactly how many it was. It was like 20 bills, and I think we got them all done. So this last term, so in the last 4 years, this has actually been the most successful delegation in the state. We got 33 out of 36 bills, which is truly extraordinary. I mean, we're like the friggin' deer hunters up there on local legislation. And then when you look at the other statewide legislation, there's a lot of times that something that, you know, you might see it one way here in St. Mary's, but you got to address it a little bit differently because there's 24 jurisdictions.
Okay, this is going to be a question for both of the candidates. We're going to start with Senator Waugh. Can you name 1 to 2 initiatives you would support to create a stronger farm industry in Maryland?
Yeah, actually, I was starting to talk about the Maryland malting facility. So we've done a lot. I've actually really been honored to work very closely with the Farm Bureau locally on a number of issues, principally on deer management things. We're starting to work on some stormwater management issues. There are some things that are peculiar to farms that we need to address on that. But the Maryland malting facility is actually one of the exciting ones. So, you know, craft beer has really taken off. All of that craft beer needs malt, and most of that malt is stuff like barley that our farmers grow as cover crops during the winter. So if you're a craft brewer and you need to buy malt, here's the bad news. You got to buy your malt from like Saskatchewan. So what we're trying to do is to set up a malting facility here that will actually consume all of our farmers' cover crops during the winter. We're going to turn those into cash crops, and we're going to become essentially the craft brewing hub for the Eastern Seaboard. Pretty much everyone who's making beer east of the Mississippi is going to come to Maryland and buy their malt.
Mr. Bailey?
Thank you. The fact that I have grown up on a farm, and all my uncles have farms, and my granddad had a farm, I feel that the fact is the farming industry in Maryland is changing, and it's changing every day, right? We don't have the traditional small tobacco farmer that we used to. That really was a big economic value for us. Now we have big truck farmings, and the other thing that's really taken place in Southern Maryland is our produce farming. Anybody that goes down to the Loveville auction and stands around and sees how many Amish, Mennonites, and the English farmers are there on a daily basis, and they sell their produce to up and down the East Coast, and it goes out and it's shipped, is a big issue. And if we could help them, I think locally that's a big issue for us.
Mr. Bailey, what would be your first priority or bill submitted if you're elected?
Great question.
My first bill submitted would deal with school safety. And the reason is, I think that we need to tighten up and take that small step
And move it
forward. And I think we need to do that by engaging our children, and then actually this time engage the experts, the parents, engage the superintendents of school and the school boards, and engage the sheriffs. The people that are going to be responsible for this should be in the room when we make these decisions. We shouldn't utilize small group think methodology that causes problems down the road when we know better than the people right here on the ground that are dealing with it on a daily basis. And I would be proud to have that as my first initiative.
And this will be the last question, and it's for Senator Waugh. As a small business owner, I am very concerned about the way you acted and the quotes you gave the paper when you walked out of the St. Mary's Chamber of Commerce meeting. Why would you treat the business owners in our county that way? Defend your action.
So I got to say, this is back to the whole Marine thing. I was incredibly frustrated by Delegate Fisher's actions, because Delegate Fisher abused his office. He abused his position as the delegation chair for the House delegation, because he knew that the county delegation as a whole actually supported the county's bond request. So he decided on his own to unilaterally reduce that request by himself, $40 million. So I was kind of shocked when that happened. And then when we figured it out, we ended up having to fix it, and Delegate Clark took the lead, and we got the bill amended, and then it moved forward the way that it needed to be. So I got to tell you, I have never seen anyone abuse their office and try to perpetuate a fraud by lying to people about how it came about. And that disturbed me so much. I knew I was going to blow up in a public setting, and that was unacceptable, so I had to remove myself from it, because you guys didn't want to see Colonel Law come out of the Chamber of Commerce.
We're going to go ahead and do the closing statements from the candidates. Senator Waugh, we'll go ahead and have you go.
All right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for coming here tonight. I love the questions. The questions were terrific. Really appreciate the engagement here. There's an extraordinary number of people. Jack, I told you, you weren't going to die. You survived. Neither of us had. Look, people always ask, how you doing? It's like, I'm not dead and I'm unindicted. So that's above average for senators. So I've got to set the bar low, Anyway, so I was really excited to be here tonight, and I hope what you get out of this is that, I'm really passionate. Okay, I am really passionate. And it can be to a fault. I'm a Marine. I'm sorry. There's no getting rid of it. I am who I am. I'm trying hard. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm really hoping that I can earn your support and gain your vote when it comes back, because I want to be the bulldog who's working for you for the next 4 years. Now, as we're looking down here and we're wondering, why is all of this? So, well, the simple answer is it's him. And the answer is that Mr. Shank is down here for one reason and one reason only. And that's because he wants a lapdog who's going to work for him. Not because he wants to see a change in policy. That bothers me. I'm here to work for you. I'm not here to work for anybody else. I'm not here, I don't work for the governor. I work for you guys. I'm going to be supporting you. I've proven I'm going to take the hard votes. I'll stand up, I will stand on principle, and I will represent you every day of the week. Every day of the week. So I hope I can earn that support, and we'll see you later. Thanks very much.
Mr. Bailey.
Thank you. Just to clarify, he was the only Republican to step away from the governor and vote to make our schools less safe. In the closing statement, I'd like to represent you as your state senator. And I want to bring this race home. And I want to bring it home because I'm proud to be from Southern Maryland and represent St. Mary's and Calvert County. Whether you're a waterman, whether you're a farmer, whether you came here for the quality of life and you moved from PG County, you came here in the military, or you came here during one of the BRACs. That's what makes St. Mary's and Calvert County and Southern Maryland so valuable to me. And I want to represent you. And I want to represent you on a full-time basis. I don't want to have a part-time senator who doesn't even live in St. Mary's County. I want to represent each and every one of you. The office should be here. And the office needs to be brick and mortar, and I give you my word that as soon as I'm elected, we will have a brick and mortar office the same way we had since 1994. We will have one, and I will be accessible, approachable, available, and committed to each one of you. Thank you very much for your time tonight. And you know what? We're going to bring this home. Thank you.
We did have some questions that we weren't able to get to tonight, and I will email both candidates the questions so they can answer them in their own time.
And where
We're
were the responses?
gonna resume at 7:15 with the sheriff's candidate. Board of Education candidates for quiet tonight. So we're gonna go ahead and start with the opening remarks with Sheriff Cameron.
Good evening. I think the last candidate debate is continuing in the lobby. I am your sheriff, Tim Cameron. I was first elected in 2006 and again in 2010 and then again in 2014. In 2010 and 2014, even though unopposed, I garnered the most cast votes of any candidate. Certainly, in my opinion, an affirmation of the voters that they were more than satisfied with the performance of their sheriff's office and their sheriff. I have over 37 years of law enforcement and public safety experience, formal education, and specialized training with significant crisis management and law enforcement and corrections leadership experience. I've hired good people. I hold them accountable, I train them well, and I continue to reinvest in them. The Sheriff's Office celebrates a rich history, and we have rich traditions, focusing on current challenges to public safety in our community. We do this by utilizing cutting-edge technology to track and establish crime trends, communicate with our citizens, work to improve the quality of life in our communities in partnership with our citizens, and identify and prepare for future challenges. My goal has been and will continue to be to establish your St. Mary's County Sheriff's Office as a premier law enforcement agency that is responsive and accountable to its communities. I appreciate you all being here tonight. Thank you.
Mr. Phelan.
Well, good evening, everybody. Again, I want to thank the NAACP and the League of Women Voters for putting this on tonight and stuff. Before I get into a little bit about my background, let me answer the first question that I always get. Do you have any law enforcement background? That answer is no. Okay. My background is as a military Navy officer for almost 27 years. Graduated from the Naval Academy in 1979 after growing up in the San Francisco Bay Area. Became a Navy pilot and served in many squadrons. Flew combat missions off of the USS Midway and Desert Storm. Led a squadron out of Whidbey Island. Was a test pilot here and a program manager here. Led the test wing here at Pax River. Lived here off and on since 1987. Continuous since 1997. Our home is in Hollywood. Our children we raised here, all graduated from Leonardtown High School, and have gone on to successful careers on their own. Okay. Second question I usually get is, Tom, why are you doing this? You know, that you had a successful Navy career. You now have you're in the business world as a defense contractor. Why would you do this? Okay, several reasons. When you dig into what's going on in the sheriff's office outside of the public forum and the public media, you find out that because what do you need to solve the issues here in the county? School safety, heroin opioid crisis, and just plain traffic. You have to have adequate personnel. Okay? Without adequate personnel, you can't do the job and support community and public safety. That is what I want to try and bring to St. Mary's County here is my experience as a leader and as a mentor that I grew up with, and I can bring that level of expertise to the sheriff's office. I can work with county commissioners, that's the budget authority. I can work with the other federal agencies, such as the state police, to form a good team to support in the public safety area here in St. Mary's County. And again, I thank you all for being here tonight. I know it's warm, but we've got at least the doors open, and we'll take your questions. Thank you.
For Mr. Phelan, with no law enforcement experience, why do you think you are qualified to be sheriff, and how will you deal with your lack of knowledge and experience?
I think I started the answer to that question already. So I believe that my military experience, where I grew up as a leader and as a junior officer in a squadron, I had mentors from both the enlisted and the officer level that brought me along through training, mentorship. The sheriff's office is a larger organization. Yes, there's organizational pieces that I would have to learn. I have attended their Citizens Academy, which gives you a very top level piece of the sheriff's office. But any organization you go into, you got to learn how they run, and that's what I think I can do for it.
This is a multi-part question for both candidates. For over 13 years, local politicians have struggled to address the issue for building a new jail despite state approval. Do you find this project necessary? How do you justify your decision for or against? Are you for or against a renovation or a new facility? What are some of the key issues facing the Corrections Department today? Multi-part. Oh, that's for Sheriff Cameron.
Yes, thank you for that multi-part question. Yes, the answer is yes. Yes, I'm in favor of this refinement and the expansion that is underway now because it addresses some critical aspects of the detention center. It addresses some of the components of the Justice Reinvestment Act. It addresses components of inmate rehabilitation. It addresses necessary components of mental health, substance abuse treatment. It supports our new pretrial initiative. It resolves an overcrowding issue that we have right now. And it also addresses some employee attrition challenges that we have right now. So that is for the refinement and the expansion. But even once that's successfully completed, I think we need to immediately begin discussions about a new adult detention center for the future.
Mr. Phelan?
I would also have to agree with that. As I followed this issue over many years of living here in the county, you definitely need a renovation of the jail. You can certainly use a new facility, and it's tied to, one, the rehabilitation of the inmates there. I've had the backstage tours of the jail itself, so I've seen their facility. I've seen what is needed there from both, confinement opportunities or confinement facilities there, as well as the treatment piece of it and stuff. So, but yes, I would agree that we would need that facility.
This is also a question for both candidates, and we'll start with Mr. Phelan. If it is proven that a deputy was untruthful during the performance of their duties, should they remain a deputy?
I would say it depends, because you have to, yes, you have to keep police officers at a very high standard. There's no question about that. But every opportunity out there is a learning experience and an opportunity for furthering their expertise and their experience. I myself, as a junior officer, was taken out to the woodshed several times, and Tom, don't do that again. And you learn from those experiences, and to make you grow as a person and grow as with your experience, and you can file that away. The next time, when you come into something, a situation or something similar, that you can respond appropriately.
Sheriff Cameron?
Thank you. My opinion is a little bit different on this. As a career police officer and now as sheriff for the last 11.5 years, this is what I know. If you have a sustained finding of truthfulness, you cannot stay amongst our ranks. We are a profession that espouses that we are held to a higher standard, and you have to walk that walk. So, and I've heard this argument about minor or frivolous kind of complaints, or frivolous lies, or minor lies. There's no such thing, ladies and gentlemen, especially when it comes to your liberty and your freedom. Because if an employee will lie about something minor, what will they lie about when it is you on the line? So that is, we're adamant about maintaining that. I don't apologize for that. The other thing that I know based on the Brady law is if I have a member that has a sustained finding of truthfulness, our state's attorney and most of the state's attorneys I know across the state will not allow them to testify. That means that case is dropped. And if you're a victim of a crime, that is no way to satisfy our obligation to you. Thank you.
This is also for both candidates, and we'll start with Sheriff Cameron. Do we have a school-to-prison pipeline in St. Mary's County? If so, what would you do to correct it?
So that's interesting. There's been a lot of discussion on that. So I think our partners, and that's a term that's overused, but I think it's very appropriate for St. Mary's County because we have very, very strong partnerships. One of the things that when you came in, and some of you are wearing the community center, I think that's a component part. So if we can raise enough money to create a community center, I think that interrupts that pipeline of those young people into our detention center. So many things are tied to how people end up in our detention center, either through drugs and mental health, other co-occurring disorders. But one of the things we know is graduation rates directly reflect our incarceration rates. So clearly, we have to do more with our youth to dissuade them and deter them away from jail. And I think that's money best spent in their younger years when they're very impressionable. Thank you.
Mr. Phelan?
Thank you, great question. Part of that, another piece of that is school resource officers. Do we have enough of them? No. I attended the Leonardtown High School just before the Great Mills tragedy happened, and a question was posed, why don't we have SROs in all the schools? The sheriff's answer was, I don't have the personnel. And we have to have personnel to satisfy some of these issues. Having those school resource officers not only provides that security, provides that presence and potential visibility and mentorship to those students in the schools. So I think that's a piece that is also needed. The added school resource officers to provide that piece to the schools. Thank you.
Mr. Phelan, this question is for you. What is the Fourth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, and why is it important to law enforcement?
I'm going to have to refer back to my history lessons, of which I have forgotten. So I will have to be honest with you that I do not know that off the top of my head.
Sheriff Cameron?
Fourth Amendment, that's for you to be free from unreasonable searches in your homes. That makes us in law enforcement adhere to your constitutional liberties and freedoms. That's exactly what that's about as it falls in our realm.
That's right. Thank you so much.
Sheriff Cameron, how do you think you can appeal to the youth to encourage more young people to enter the field of law enforcement?
That's a great question. And our best recruiters are our personnel. And our best personnel that recruit are young officers or young and tenure officers, because we have career people that look like the very diverse communities that they work in. And that is working for us right now. I know that the members of the NAACP know that we have an agreement, and they agreed to help us recruit, and we have been successful. Are we where we need to be? No. Will we ever stop recruiting diversity? No. I think that's the first step. The second step is having a staff, deputy sheriffs, correctional officers, and civilians that are communicative, that talk to people, that are empathetic, and treat people like they want to be treated. There's a different culture in the sheriff's office, and very much the culture is one of engagement of the community. Communication, you hear a lot about de-escalation. It's simply treating people like a human and being empathetic. Thank you.
Mr. Bailey?
And certainly the recruitment piece is difficult. Being a police officer nowadays is a difficult job, and very few people want to get into that profession. Certainly it's in the limelight, everything's recorded, and so why would a young person want to become a police officer? And the sheriff is right. You have to have that community involvement and that one-on-one, potentially discussion with community people, young folks, people moving into a second career, to show them the benefits of what they're trying to get into. But it's a difficult process. And that would be, again, be one of my goals, is to improve that recruitment piece, because you have to have the pipeline in order to have the adequate personnel to support the public safety in the community.
This is for both candidates. Mr. Phelan, what are some key aspects of community policing, and how will you implement or improve community policing in our community?
Community policing is probably one of the key items for public safety here in the community. You look at what the COPS unit has done here along Great Mills Road in Lexington Park. Great strides in what they've been able to do and their presence out there. That has to be taken to a lot of the other communities out there. We're a very diverse rural community, so it's not going to work in every part of the county. But that is what I believe one of the key features and the key focus is having a good, strong community policing effort where you have that interaction with the community members and that positive respect that the sheriff talked about between the officers and the folks in the community. Thank you.
Sheriff Cameron?
Thank you. I wanted to touch on something Tom had said, and he's exactly right. And those SROs in the schools are also another very strong and important component in recruiting. So community policing, we're a community policing agency. And the reason I say that, and I define community policing, one of the most important ingredients is you have to be absolutely committed to sustainable, viable communities. And the only way to work towards that goal is to work in concert with your communities. So as a law enforcement agency, you have to be more concerned with the outcomes, not the outputs. Outputs are arrests and citations, necessary in enforcement. But outcomes are more important. And what is the outcome? Again, viable, sustainable communities. If we need to do community cleanups, if we need to address noise ordinances, that's a holistic approach to law enforcement. But you can arrest a person that's intoxicated on Great Mills Road every day. But really, to go beyond that, you have to scratch the surface away and find out why they're out there. Get them into treatment, get them into housing, get them into a job. That's community policing.
This is also a question for both candidates, and we'll start with Sheriff Cameron. What capital improvement project do you feel is most important for the Sheriff's Office, and explain why?
Our capital improvement project list would be first, the jail expansion and refinement. That is in progress. I think we're on schedule. We have support monetarily from the state and support monetarily from the commissioners. Very necessary. The Lexington Park Community Policing Station, again, another very important CIP project that is on schedule. It's supported by the commissioners. That money is currently in the budget. very important. The next CIP project would be space. Captain Kirk said it on Star Trek, space is the final frontier. It certainly is for the Sheriff's Office and our current office space. I say that tongue in cheek, but it really is. So imagine a crime lab that's limited by space, and we have new equipment and new ways to analyze evidence. We can't do it. We simply can't do it because of space. We're getting ready to put a modular building behind our Sheriff's Office headquarters so our personnel in the Maryland State Police can bring in drug evidence safely, not be exposed to fentanyl. Thank you. Good question.
Mr. Phelan?
Yes, excellent question. I'd have to totally agree with the sheriff there. The jail would be the #1 priority. I think the capital investment program that they have gets scrutinized through the county commissioner's budget process. And so I think the way they prioritize those projects, and certainly the jail would be the top of the list.
The next question is for Mr. Phelan. You are running for sheriff with little experience in law enforcement / running a prison. What is your motivation in running for sheriff, and what do you offer that Sheriff Cameron doesn't offer?
My motivation is to bring in some fresh leadership and a fresh perspective and an experience that I brought from being in around the globe, around the world, in multiple commands, where I've picked up leadership traits and leadership experience from when I first became a junior officer and a junior pilot to leading a major program and leading the test wing here at Pax River. That's an experience that you can't gather in a lot of everyday work. Yes, the sheriff has been here. He's lived and worked here. He's been a police officer for 30 plus years, been the sheriff for almost 12. It's time for a change. And that's what I can bring, is that experience in leadership and running an organization, and running a big budget, all those things is what I can bring, because when you look at what the office is, it's another business. They got to build a budget, execute it, defend it, and execute it. Thank you.
Sheriff Cameron, what is your stance on diversity hiring?
Well, I think we've talked about that. We have a diversity hiring plan. It's in place at the Sheriff's Office. We accentuate that by targeting diverse applicants and targeting applicants, period. For the first time in several years, we're in single-digit vacancies, which is very important. And please understand that that's just not a local phenomenon. This is a national phenomenon with challenge of police and corrections resources, more so in police. So one of the things that we've done is we're very cautious how we depict in our advertising, how we depict our employees, to indicate that there's potential and advancement potential for diverse candidates. We attend a number of hiring fairs at traditionally African-American colleges. We go to military bases. We advertise, and WHUR is a perfect example, and we've had very good response from really this targeted diversity recruiting plan.
Mr. Phelan?
Yeah, I would totally agree. You certainly want to try and match up the diversity of your communities with the diversity of your sheriff's office there. But you also don't want to discount the fact that you may have qualified applicants that may not meet those diversity goals that have been set forward or that you want to have. But you're going to want to try to, as the sheriff said, go to those areas where you can find potential applicants that would be your top quality deputies that you would want on your sheriff's office.
For both candidates, and we'll start with Mr. Phelan, what are the main issues facing corrections today?
Certainly, it's the recidivism that goes along. Once folks have been released, how often they come back. And I know they have the data for that. Certainly, probably the treatment facilities for the heroin and opioid problems that involve some of the inmates that are at the jail and stuff. So how are you going to treat that while they're in the jail or through working with the local hospital? But that, I think, is probably one of the biggest things there.
Sheriff Cameron?
Yeah, thank you. I think I touched on this earlier. So One of the, well, several of the biggest challenges: one, satisfying the Justice Reinvestment Act; two, inmate rehabilitation. So we need to accentuate our time with these people that we have in our detention center, because they are returning to a neighborhood near you. Mental health. The majority of our inmates in that detention center have co-occurring disorders, not just a chemical dependency to alcohol or drugs, but some trauma-induced mental crisis potentially. So we deal with a lot of co-occurring disorders. We are the largest provider of mental health services in St. Mary's County. We have recently initiated what has been called by the judges the gold standard in our pretrial initiative, and that is going very well. Overcrowding is certainly a big challenge. Employee attrition. Solitary confinement is another thing that is changing in the application of humane incarceration. So a lot of challenges in corrections, certainly.
This is also for both candidates, and we'll start with Sheriff Cameron. Should the sheriff's election be nonpartisan, similar to the way the Board of Education is selected?
It's a tough question. I would love to see the sheriff's election be nonpartisan like the judges. I just think you would then have to convince our legislators who are elected in partisan elections. So I think it makes sense for the sheriff, like the judge, to be elected in a nonpartisan fashion. I'm a Republican, yes, but that doesn't mean that I only police a Republican segment of this county. I police, and you're my employer, you're the boss. So that makes sense to me.
Mr. Phelan?
Yes, I would totally agree that this position is nonpartisan. The job of the sheriff is to enforce the laws of the federal laws, the state laws, and the county ordinances. Whether I lean to the right or lean to the left should be no factor in how the sheriff's office is run. So I would totally agree that it should be nonpartisan.
The next question is for Mr. Phelan. What would you have done differently in the wake of the school shooting than your opponent?
Actually, I'm not sure I would do anything different. His response and the sheriff's response of the other law enforcement agencies to respond, as well as the emergency responders to respond, I think was done remarkably well. When you have a school resource officer that responded so quickly and decisively, as well as the response, from the other agencies, from other counties, I don't think probably could have been better. Obviously, had not been part of their hot wash-ups or the debriefs that have went on, because I'm sure there's lessons learned that they could have done things a little bit differently or done a little bit better. And I'm sure there's a way to use, hopefully never have to use again in the near future. But I think they really did a fine job with that response.
This is for both candidates. Sheriff Cameron, over a period of 1 month, 3 cars were traveling head-on in my lane of traffic. What will you do to stop distracted driving?
The simple answer is traffic enforcement. And I offer this within the context of it's resource-based. We had previously 2 people in traffic safety. I reduced that by 100%. It's now 1. But with that said, that's 1 individual that we try to rotate through communities where we have speeding complaints in communities. The rest of the patrol force, both us and the Maryland State Police, enforce traffic on our roadways. It's difficult to be everywhere all the time. One of the things we've been successful in, and I know that some people in this room know this, is videos that were taken that were either sent to us directly or on Facebook, and we followed up and we've actually charged people. Commissioner Jarbo forwarded me one not too long ago. One of the things we're looking at now is we do a comprehensive traffic report at the end of every year. We're going to participate in the state's strategic highway safety plan. We're reforming a traffic safety committee. I'm trying to bring in as many citizens as possible to look at our enforcement, our education, and our engineering.
Mr. Phelan?
I travel these roads every day from Hollywood down to the base here. So I'm well versed in the traffic problems that we have here in the county. Not only down Great Mills Road, but up the 235 corridor headed northbound. I think it has to be in conjunction with the state highway. authorities there to further analyze the traffic issues. Sort of distracted driving, without enforcement of that, you're not going to fix that. But the overcrowded roads, the roads we have, and the blatant violations that a lot of the drivers do, whether it's blowing through the right turn only lane to running red lights considerably on a lot of the intersections. If you're number one at that intersection, you better be looking both ways before you pull out. Thank you.
This is the last question I have, so if anyone else has a question for the sheriff's candidates, please let the runners know. And we're going to start this one with Mr. Phelan. What is the Supreme Court case of Miranda versus Arizona, and why is it important to law?
I understand Miranda rights, so we can probably go with that. The actual court case, I do not know, but you certainly have to respect the rights of individuals. Make sure they understand their rights when they're being detained, and I'll leave it at that, because obviously I'm not a civics major today.
Sheriff Cameron?
Obviously a lawyer in the room.
Thank you.
Tom's exactly right. Miranda rights are exactly that. We have a responsibility when we're going to take somebody's freedom away. We have to explain to them their rights under Miranda. That's a right not to incriminate themselves, not to make a statement. They have a right to counsel. They have a right to remain silent. Right? All those are critically important rights under Miranda based on your constitutional liberties. So that, in an essence, is that Miranda case.
Okay. With no more questions, we will, oh, wait a minute. Okay, we're going to start this one with Sheriff Cameron, and it looks like this is also a multi-part question. What is the liability of the gun owner? If a gun is used in a shooting, what is the liability of the owner? Can the owner be sued for medical expenses or wrongful death? Shouldn't the gun owner have liability insurance like a vehicle owner? If a gun is unregistered, is that a felony? Why or why not?
Really good question. So when we get into liability, we get into civil litigation. That's a little outside the parameters of the sheriff. A little bit. And I say a little bit because I have 141 people that have guns. So one of the things that we preach to them, we train them, we continually retrain them, is their responsibility of that weapon, not just when it's on, but when it's at home. And of course, we've been confronted in the community about responsible gun ownership. So certainly, any of us can be sued at any time, especially with a lethal weapon. If it's used in an event and somehow you violated the law, in other words, the requirement for you to secure a weapon to ensure that a child or someone under the legal age couldn't get access to it, certainly you're going to be open for litigation. Did that address that multi-part?
I think so.
Thank you.
Mr. Phelan?
Well, in today's world, whether you have liability insurance or not, will not stop you from being sued. You know, if you're going to require liability insurance, much like you have in your car, whether you drive your car without insurance, it's not going to stop you from being sued. Will that help? Certainly, yeah, but it's not the be-all, end-all to have liability insurance for gun owners.
Okay. That's it. Okay. We're going to go ahead and start with the closing remarks, and we'll let Mr. Phelan start that.
Okay, well, obviously I have to go back to 10th grade civics to brush up on some constitutional law. And as Tim said, there's probably a lawyer in the room that was asking me those questions, so thank you for that. I will just go back to, again, what I want to try and bring to the sheriff's office. A little bit of change, a little bit of new leadership, perspective from my military experience and my military, as well as my business experience, both being in the acquisition world as a program manager and now in the business world as a defense contractor. all those things I think can factor in. Yes, there's a lot I have to learn about the inner workings of the sheriff's office. No question about that. But that's an ongoing process that would take some time. I understand that, but it's what I can bring as a prospective sheriff with my experience. Thank you very much for being here, and again, thanks for the League of Women Voters and NAACP for putting this on tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Cameron.
So I'd first like to thank the League of Women Voters and again the NAACP St. Mary's chapter for tonight's panel. Tom, I'd like to thank you for your answer about Great Mills. I really would. That was, I really appreciate that. And I would tell you, ladies and gentlemen, that day, I not only was proud of the men and women of law enforcement, but this community. It was tremendous. And so I tell you, nothing that day happened by accident. Nothing. Tom is a very seasoned professional. I respect his military career and his career after the military. I mean that sincerely. But I went through a police academy. I started the foundation in a police academy. Just like a doctor goes to medical school, just like a lawyer goes to law school. And just like the other professions, as a police officer attending the police academy, as I ascended that rung, that ladder, I became a supervisor and I received specific training. And then I got into management and I received specific training. And then I was in an executive leadership position and I got more training. Not only the training, but the experience as I learned and I mastered the mastery of those skills in my profession. That's all I know. I'm blessed to be in a profession where I wear my passion that's at uniform every day. I love the people I work with and I love the people that I work for. And this is my home. My wife and my two boys, we live here. I hope that they will continue to live here and raise their family. So one candidate has real law enforcement experience and corrections experience, workforce level, supervision and management level, and then finally in the executive leadership realm. I'm accessible, I'm approachable, and I'm available to my personnel and to you. I'm committed to continuous improvement of the Sheriff's Office, and I remain always passionate about learning about my profession and my cops and my community. We have an incredibly talented workforce here that accomplishes great things. They solve crime, protect our community, and save lives. I accomplished nothing, but we are mighty, and that I have learned from my community. It's a privilege to serve you, and I humbly ask for your vote June 26th. Thank you all very much.
Thank you all for being here today. Pardon me. I'm Mike Darris. I've been in the county for 26 years. I was a D.C. firefighter in Washington, D.C., of course. I served my time up there. I came down here to St. Mary's County to get a rest, to get some peace and quiet because of the busy life I had up there. Came to the county with the intention of relaxing and taking my time, having a good time. I then went to work for the Lumberg School of Seamanship, where I was a safety instructor for the seaside, sea ship, siding, etc. Trying to get something out of my throat. I love the county very much. I've been given to the communities all my life, and I want to give back to our community. I love this county with all my heart and soul. My first visit to this county, believe it or not, was 1956. I was 10 years old, and I went to Camp Brown. That was a wonderful place to be from out of the city for a change. My wife Alice is with me tonight. She holds a master's in medical science. Due to an accident we had several years ago, I lost my leg and Alice lost her career. I don't want anybody to think this leg will slow me down, because it won't. I promise you that. I've been working with the commissioners on a weekly basis. I've been observing what they do and how they perform their duties, which I'm very proud of. I want to continue serving the county, and I hope and pray that I'll get your vote. But at any rate, thanks very much. Eric, thanks for introducing me to your son. He's beautiful.
Okay, Ms. Abel?
Good evening. Hello, I'm Anne Marie Abel, and I'm running to be your county commissioner. For the past several months, I've been attending the commissioners' meetings, and I've observed that the commissioners' table needs someone who is both a leader and a problem solver. Someone who works well in a team environment to reach decisions that are mutually beneficial to all the parties involved. Someone focused on better governing for the county. Someone with a new voice. And guess what? I think that someone is me. I'm running because I care about our community, people, and our success. I will listen to you and what you have to say. I will bring fresh perspective and offer new ideas to the commissioners' table for our county's future. I'm a leader and a problem solver. I have more than 35 years of leadership and experience working and solving challenging problems. I'm a retired civil servant from Pax River, where I led diverse teams to solve problems, make things better, get results, and deliver on outcomes. I will do this for the people of St. Mary's. I will do it joyfully. I've lived in the county for over 37 years, and with my husband, I've raised a family. I've served on the Domestic Violence Board. I've served on the Economic Development Commission, as well as the Millennium Committee. I have volunteered at my children's schools. Now, we all know that our county is on pace to continue growing, and more people will come here and decide to call St. Mary's home. According to the Maryland Association of Counties, we are home to the youngest population and the fastest growing workforce. And as a leader, I'm concerned about the lack of housing for working families with modern incomes and the lack of new entry-level jobs and better paying jobs that are unrelated to the base. I'm concerned about the increased stress on our roads and our public safety, our infrastructure. And just as concerning to me is that some of our neighbors are falling behind and having a hard time participating in the county's economic fortune. It is my goal that nobody lack opportunity or benefit from the decisions